Okay, welcome to our sixth meeting to discuss Dan Gutterson's Snow Falling on Cedars as we move through the book and we're starting to get into, I hope, more exciting and interesting parts of the novel. And so I guess what I'll do is, before we start our regular discussion, just to let people know at home, we are on Twitter at G.A.P Great Books. That's our Twitter handle. Is that what they call it? A handle? I don't even know. Call sign? Handle? Nickname? G.A.P Great Books, all one word. So you can tell I use Twitter a lot. Okay. But I think you kids today use Twitter, right? You crazy kids use it. Yeah. I don't know. I got too much going on. Facebook I do use. All right, so this was, for me, this is one of the sections of the book I really liked. I feel like it's really cool because things get really interesting without giving away, I think, anything. And just out of curiosity, I know I always ask this, but has anyone read Ahead? No? Has anyone read Afoot? I love that joke. Yeah. All right, so. Okay, so if you haven't read Ahead, that's actually kind of a good thing because that frames our conversation with these 4 chapters because there are some interesting things to wonder about what is happening or what might happen. So I'll go straight to the questions unless someone has a comment or question. Do people like this part a little bit better? Well, not that the other parts were bad, but I think things really start to get moving here. And we get some real insight and some pretty significant information. What happens, though, is still, when we're done with those 4 chapters, is left to our own anticipation and sense of suspense. All right, so for chapter 21, for what I have for the question, the question guide only gave me one question, but it's a good one, and it's about Nels Gudmundsen. Who's Nels Gudmundsen? Am I saying his name? Gudmundsen. Yeah, the lawyer for the accused. Okay, for Kabuo Miyamoto. Can you remember about that description? It was a little almost uncomfortable. Some of the description.
It was a little weird.
A little weird. Good.
He's like 79.
Yes.
So.
It felt weird. It got into a lot of detail about his age. But I'm going to use this too. Was any of it shocking? Like you thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. Or was it pretty normal stuff? Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Very good pickup. Do you remember that? He's he's cross-examining the wife of the deceased, and Helen, and she's very attractive, and she's young, and he feels uncomfortable a little bit. But is that a normal thing? Have you ever met up with somebody who is very attractive, and do you say in your mind, you go to, I don't know, let's just say you go to a store to buy a shirt, and the salesperson is very attractive. Does that completely go out of your mind as you're doing the transaction? Or is it part of Okay, yeah, because I'm thinking of it as on the fly, right? Have you ever had to do business with somebody or encounter somebody who's very attractive and you can't get that out of your mind?
Oh, yeah.
Okay? You start talking incorrectly, you drop your money, things like that? Okay? So he's feeling, and he's a lot older than she is, so maybe is that part of the discomfort?
Maybe that's what he's a lot older.
Yeah. Right, and that's interesting that he's almost 80. So do some people maybe have in mind, okay, after you reach a certain age, you don't think about those things anymore?
You just don't want to think about it that way.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay, no, that's great. I like that. Great observation. Thinking about, I mean, let's just put it out there, thinking about the sexuality of a senior citizen, right? It's kind of, but do they just disappear? One day they're like, well, I'm 65, it's all over now. Well, good thing I got cable. I, I don't know. So that's a really interesting, I like that. But do you know what I liked about that description of him is it felt, I think, sad in a way because he's by himself.
Yeah, and he lost his way.
Right. And he lost his wife, but did you get the sense that there was this great love affair between him and his wife?
He said that they didn't have the best relationship.
Yes, indeed. They did not. In fact, on page 301, it says, they'd not gotten along particularly well, but nevertheless, he missed her. Occasionally, he sat in his apartment and wept in order to empty himself of self-pity and remorse. And that might be even more embarrassing than the other stuff, thinking of like this dignified older man sitting in his house crying. But it makes him human. And the other part is the description goes through his physical condition and sometimes in a little awkward detail, but he's getting old. And it's embarrassing for him. And he's lonely, I think, is part of it. And he said his mind is failing, his memory isn't as good as it was, and it says his eyes provided him with only half a view of the world, so his eyes are failing. I mean, are these unusual things for someone older? No. So we get this background thing with the lawyer, but I feel like it humanizes him. It makes him more realistic. And the other thing I like is it transitions from, on page 302, this description where you start to feel like here's this old, weak man, but then we transition right into what on page 302 there? What starts happening? What do we go to? The trial. And he's on his game, isn't he? So what I like about that part for me is that message that everybody's got something going on in their lives, no matter how strong they appear or how wise or experienced as this lawyer appears. I mean, we know because of what we're told is that he sits at home crying sometimes. So this background into these very human characters, they're fragile, they're flawed. And I like the way that we talked about characterization a few classes ago, how he gives us a complete picture of this lawyer instead of just he's the lawyer who asks these really tough questions. And speaking of him as a lawyer, there's an old saying that lawyers will say about asking questions. I don't know if you've ever heard this saying. I'll give the first half of it. So for lawyers, never ask a question if you're a lawyer. Have you ever heard a saying that starts with, never ask a question no? If you don't already know the answer. Never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. Now, that might sound off the top of your head weird. But why would a lawyer have to ask a question that they already know the answer to? What are they really doing? Excuse me? Okay, seeing if they can get a lie, because if they know the answer, that can catch them in a lie. Actually, great point. I wasn't even thinking of that, but I like that. Okay, proving a point to whom? Is a lawyer just talking just because they want to have a conversation with the person? And the judge and jury, right? It's showing that he knows what they're saying is the lawyer, a good lawyer should know the answers, but they're going to bring them out in a way that makes the story look however they want it to look, the situation. They're going to construct it in such a way that the person is going to either look guilty or not guilty, or at least a reasonable doubt. That's probably the number one goal, is that to at least plant that reasonable doubt when you're talking about a murder case. And he does such a really good job of asking all of these questions. And if you remember on page, well, he goes back and forth with her a few times about her speaking for her husband and talking about a conversation that her husband had that she didn't witness. So think about this. You're asking somebody to tell you about a conversation that a dead person had that you didn't actually hear, but the person told you about. See how many layers are there? And he's trying to make that clear. And the judge does seem to get a little irritated, but I don't know if you remember, there was a little scene in this chapter where he pauses and he looks at the judge while he's interviewing her. I'm looking for that underlined. He turned his good eye on Judge Fielding. So what he's trying to do is get the judge to make that statement later on about the statute that talks about speaking for a dead person. And that was really all he wanted to do. Okay, I don't know if there's much more. There's much more to discuss in that chapter. We've talked about characters in this book whom we like, don't like, maybe have different. What are your thoughts about this character before we move on? Do you like him, not like him? Don't trust him, trust him? Is he competent, not competent? Thoughts? Would you want him to be your lawyer?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes? Why?
Definitely knows what he's doing. He's experienced.
He's experienced, he knows what he's, even though you know these things about him, that he's crying in his house and he has all these physical problems, that's fine?
You wouldn't be a 79-year-old lawyer unless you were good at it.
Oh, interesting. Right, you wouldn't be there if you weren't good at it. That's a great point. And I feel like he's a good man. I think we're meeting, so far, maybe I'm mistaken. We don't know, at least when we're reading the book, we don't know about the defendant, if he's truly a good man or not. I mean, you might have an opinion at this point. But other than him, the only character whom I have a bad impression of is the mother, Mrs. Oh boy, her name's escaping me. Hein, the mother, Etta, right? The one who doesn't like Japanese people, and she's the only character that I've seen in this whole book who is really on the dark side on the wrong side of positive. The other characters, I think, are like human beings. Real human beings are not all good or all bad. That's what we have in cartoons. Real human beings make mistakes and do their best and learn from their mistakes and make them again and do all kinds of things that people do. And that's another thing I like about the characters in this book. All right. Chapter 22. And in your question sheet it says, really important chapter. And it is. And the power goes out. And the question that we were given is there any significance to that symbolically?
It was kind of a coincidence that as soon as the power went out,
Exactly. What a coincidence. The power goes out as soon as he finishes his question and the prosecution rests their case. And then the power goes out. Okay? And let's get a sense, remember, and I don't know if you got a chance to read any in the How to Read Literature Like a Professor book, but there was something in there about environment, the setting. Where is all of this taking place? Is it on the mountains? Is it on an island? Okay. So let's get a picture here. We have a snowstorm on an island and the power goes out. Is that a big deal? I think it is a big deal. And something about the separation or the connection with nature and how without power, without that electricity, where does that leave the people on this island, short term and let's say it was long term?
They have, most of them have no heat.
Mm-hmm.
It's all electric, their phones don't work.
No heat. Phones don't work. Lights don't work.
No, I don't know,
They're stuck. And so that, for the short term, they don't have these things. What would happen if that went on for days, weeks, months? Anarchy, or what does it show your position in the world? What do you learn about yourself as a human being and you find yourself, the power goes out and now here you are? What does that say about you? Or all of us? If the power were to totally just disappear tomorrow?
no one would know how to function.
Yeah, we wouldn't know how to function. We'd be helpless, right? Shows you how helpless humanity, despite all the tech, and this is set 60 plus years ago, but even now, I think maybe even more now, actually, how helpless we are without these things. That even though we think we've got all these great advances and we've made all this progress, without that power, without that technology, we're pretty helpless in the face of nature. That without these things, nature can overwhelm us. And the things that happen in nature are things that we can't control for the most part. At least as of now, I don't know if we can turn on or off snowstorms, hurricanes, tornadoes. Not yet, right? So I think that's another thing. It's bringing the humanity even more to the forefront of this story because they're stuck in this snowstorm. And now you have to do things like walk places and even the cars are not much use, right?
There's like 4 cars stuck in it.
Right, the car's off the road. So this exposes people as very vulnerable. So I think that's a big part of the symbolism. Plus, I like that you said it's definitely a transition. Okay, here we are, and the lights are out. The end, Act 2. As he travels around the island, as Ishmael travels around the island, do we learn anything more about island society, and those of you who live or have lived in small towns maybe can speak more to this. As he goes around from place to place, that's different than if this had happened in Boston or maybe even Manchester. Does he look around and say, I don't know who that is and where is that? But he sees a car, and what does he know right away about the car? Whose car it is. So what does that tell you about this area?
Not a lot of cars.
Okay, not a lot of cars, not a lot of people, so everyone knows each other, okay? And the storekeeper, remember, he went out there and said, okay, only 1 gallon of kerosene per family, and people are trying to look out for each other. So there's this kind of small town feel to this area, and the snowstorm brings that out even more so. He goes into the restaurant and he has her make him the lady knows him, makes him his 2 cheese sandwiches, and he just listens in on the conversations going on. So it's that small town feel. And so okay, you said everyone knows everyone. But what is it about Ishmael that is kind of stands out if everyone knows everyone? Oh, thank you. He knows all the other people, but nobody really seems to know him. I'm going to jump ahead here a couple chapters. There seems to be one, or maybe 2, but at least one person who really knows him. Do I want to say who that is as a couple chapters ahead? Who knows him? Hatsu knows him. She doesn't know him, but somebody, and you're right, that's the one of the people I was thinking of, but somebody really knows him. Sometimes you might have this person in your life who you just knows you almost too well, so well it's irritating. The mother, remember that? Remember that? Okay, so his mother, I'm jumping ahead, but his mother seems to know him. He doesn't realize that. But think back in the book. Remember how Hatsu thought she was getting away with all these things and nobody noticed? And her mother knew all along what she was up to? I would say as a parent, that's kind of true. And if you've ever babysat a little child who thought they were getting away with something and they totally weren't, okay? Because you just know. So I couldn't put it any better. People don't know him. Why don't they know him? He doesn't let anyone in. What do you think that's all about? I think that's pretty complicated, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why not?
Well, he let Alex in, and then that didn't work out well for him, and then they had to let him into the war, and then he was too upset over her holding a grudge against her, like, holding a grudge against her, that he didn't want anything else, and he was still upset about her.
Okay, I thought that was complicated, but you got it all right. So, yes, Hatsu broke his heart, really, and he lost a lot of trust. Then he went to the war and saw, do you remember it was horrible what he saw. Horrible. And so those 2 things, and he lost an arm, that didn't help. And the other thing is, he has lost his arm, and you might know this from people who have certain disabilities, like they don't like to be pitied, and he doesn't like that either, that people look at him in a different way. He's very self-conscious about that. I think that's it. He's changed, but so was Carl. And as we know, many other people were changed because of the horrible things that they had to do, and the horrible things that they saw, and the horrible things that their friends and loved ones went through. I don't know if I want that. There is a question in there about the phantom pain. Have you ever heard of phantom pain?
Yeah.
What's phantom pain?
It's when you feel, like since he doesn't have his arm, he can still, every once in a while, he'll get like the feeling that his arm is like being torn off again.
Yep.
Experiencing the injury all over again.
Right, and this is common with amputations. You still feel like it's there because your brain thinks it's there, so he has this feeling. And so what is the symbolism? I think if you think about it, it's kind of obvious. Something that was there isn't there, but he feels the pain as if it were there. Could symbolize something? His love for Hatsu, right? She's gone, but it's left that there's still the pain there, and the bitterness and the anger and all of those things. So I don't know if I want to. All right, I'll go ahead. There's a quote there I know it caused you trouble, but don't you think the snow is beautiful? Isn't it beautiful coming down? And let's go with the symbolism of the snow. Let's go, I mean, it's actually not, ooh, this took my ear off. It's not as complex as it might, I mean, what could snow symbolize? What does snow, think about, I mean, we have plenty of experience from this past winter, right? You wake up and you look outside, and what do you see? I mean, what are your impressions when you look out that window? Like, and it's before the plow truck. It's pretty. Why is it pretty?
It's just like, it's so peaceful.
Peaceful. Nature.
It's like just nature.
Perfect. Undisturbed. Yes. Okay. And I don't know if you, I used to be, when I was a little kid, maybe I had some issues, but I used to hate it when someone would go out there and ruin it, like walk in it.
I still do that.
You still hate that?
To see snow that's just like, hasn't been touched by anything, it's just totally flat and perfect.
Yes, nice. And, you look out there and it's a painting. It's just beautiful white. But now think of what white symbolizing kind of purity. Everything's clean. I mean, they're talking about in New York City and Boston, it's really nasty now because of there was a news story the other day about like how all the garbage and everything is now being exposed as the snow is melting. But when it's there, it could be covering a garbage pile, but you just see this nice white little bump. And everything is smooth and perfect. And if you remember when Ishmael looked out at the fields, okay, did he see Jorgensen's field and Hine field and one Kabul? Did he see like this field, this field, this field? What did he see? One big stretch of white. And there's a comment that, nature didn't really care about who owned what. So the snow is something that symbolizes that purity, that simpler time. It's kind of erasing, putting like an eraser over all of this, at least temporarily. But it's still, it's also dangerous. It's havoc. It's cold. It's got like another side to it because then it causes all the dirt and the slippery stuff on the floor they were talking about in the courtroom. So, Snow Falling on Cedars is the title. So let's get to Snow Falling on Cedar. There's one particular cedar that we're interested in, right? Which cedar is that? Right, the one that Hatsu and Ishmael kissed under. They talked I guess there's a little kind of hole that they would go into and kind of hide there. And as the whole world outside of them was going crazy, pre-World War II, and even there was maybe some mild racial tension even then, because remember, even before World War II, it was, you're going to marry a Japanese boy, and that's just the way it's going to be. And so she's dealing with that, but they were able to create this world, and then the world was broken apart, and now the snow is covering that cedar and covering it all in kind of a perfect white, a pure, simple, cleansing kind of experience. But he's still, he's seeing that, but I don't know that Ishmael is experiencing it that way. Which gets us to Hatsu 20 years ago and Hatsu now. Is she different? Is she different than the girl he knew? You say yes? How so? Okay. Well, we can go with some of the, she's older. She's moved on. Wow, you're on fire today. She's moved on. Mm-hmm. She follows what her mother's told her. She follows the rules that she was given. But let me ask you guys this, and I don't know. There's no answer book in the back, okay? She has moved on. I agree. But has she moved on?
And she still has feelings for him, but she knows that she shouldn't be with him, so she suppresses them.
She knows she has feelings for him. She knows she shouldn't be with him, and she suppresses them. How am I going to? She's moved on because she knows. How about this? She's moved on because she knows she has to move on.
She's lying to herself.
Oh, what do you mean? She's lying to herself. Go.
She's convinced herself that she needs to move on, and but she still has these feelings, and she like lies to herself. Saying
Okay.
she doesn't. But she
Oh, I see. So she's denying that she has the feelings. Wow. Okay, but even if even if she admitted she has the feelings, let's say she still loves him. Even though, I mean, that was a long time ago. What can she do about it, really? There's nothing to do, so would the smart thing to be to kind of acknowledge it, but it's over.
And just like feeling that it's there, but put it away because it just ruined what she has.
Oh, it'll ruin what she has. Because is what she has terrible? Does she love her husband from what we're told? I think so too. Again, you can please disagree with me. Don't throw things, but you can disagree. No, I think she loves him. Could it be possible that she was in love with Ishmael and that was over and now she loves, can that happen? Okay, so what's the problem? I think I'm getting ahead of my questions here, actually. But let's talk more about, so Hatsu now, I think, is more, she follows the rules. When she's looking out the window of the car, remember that? He looked in the rearview mirror. He was going to sneak a look, and she's staring out the window. Okay? And is she, I don't know. Now we have to guess, okay? But I think we have enough information. Is she staring out the window thinking about, oh, this is the man I loved. I wish it had worked out better. Is that what she's thinking about as she's staring out the window? Or does she finally look at him and say something that tells us what she's really thinking about? Do you remember? Do you remember the emotion she let out? I can find my page. She's in the back of the car. And on page 325, she unloads. Does she say, I'm sorry, I wish you were always the one? Is that what's on her mind? What's on her mind? The trial about her husband. What is it about the trial that she's mad about? She uses one word over and over. She thinks it's unfair. Exactly. The trial is unfair. You should talk about it in your newspaper. It's all unfair. Did you hear the things that sergeant was saying? And then she goes down a list of everybody on page 326, she says, the sheriff, the prosecutor, the judge, you. People who can do things because they run newspapers or arrest people or convict them or decide about their lives. So she's feeling like the system is rigged. Is it rigged? Is it? Let me just say that. Wow. I was looking for a good word and you got a better one. It's biased. What's the bias? They don't like Japanese people. And the war, that is probably the biggest reason, but there might be just serious just racial prejudice anyway. We had that in place when, remember, they had they picked the strawberries. They weren't allowed to own land. You had the strawberry princess had to be Japanese. So, yeah, bias. So that's what she's talking about, okay? And I think that's true. I mean, people using words like G.A.P and jumping to conclusions because they had this experience in the war. So absolutely, so she has a legitimate complaint. But here's where the little jab comes in. What do you think of this? So she says, people don't have to be unfair, do they? That isn't just part of things when people are unfair to somebody. On page 326, this line. No, it isn't. Ishmael replied coldly, you're right. People don't have to be unfair. Okay. She's talking about the trial. What's he thinking and talking about? The relationship, the letter especially. Okay? He's holding that. He's angry about that. Question number 6 is a big philosophical question that we could talk for 3 hours about, and I know you really want to. But let's just try to tone it to a few minutes. The question is unfairness a part of things for all of the characters? And I'm going to add to that question. Is unfairness part of life? You said yes immediately. It is? So all the characters, that's just what happens? Life is the way it is. You can't control anything or some things? Most things. Okay, good. I'll go with that. Think about it. The people who were kicked out of their homes, taken out of their homes and locked up in a camp. Karl Heinz's wife and kids. Okay. The sheriff having to tell this woman that her husband is dead. And maybe this gentleman who's being accused of murder, and it's not looking good right now in the trial because, well, what's hurting him okay, we already know about the bias. What else is not helping him? And we talked about this, I think, a little last week. Okay, he admitted that he did encounter him. Evidence does not help. There are things on the boat that link him to the other boat. The sergeant's testimony. Excellent. There is one other thing. The blood, the blood type matched. Okay? So you have all of this stuff adding up. But let me ask you about this part, and I think you know enough to answer this question. If you were to look over there during the trial and see him, and maybe this is projecting yourself, okay? Think of yourself. if you were at a murder trial and you were being accused of murder and going to have to be taken away from your wife and family, or husband and family, okay? And you're on trial, how would you be acting if you were sitting there? You'd be nervous and all that, and would you be upset?
Yeah, and you wouldn't know what the outcome is based on the way people planning the things that are making you look guilty. You wouldn't be
Ooh.
collected.
Thank you. I forgot that part. Yeah, and you're sitting there and your trial's not going well, right? You're looking more guilty. So if I'm looking over at you, I'm going to see somebody who's upset, who's looking nervous. We look over there, what are people seeing? Do you remember? Sitting there with no expression, his arms on the table, no emotion. That's not helping, okay? You'll sometimes hear in the trials when they're doing the sentencing, even when the person is found guilty, some demonstration of remorse. You know what remorse is, right? Remorse, you feel guilty, you feel bad, you wish you hadn't done it. That can help you a little bit, but he's not really helping his case because he's sitting there with this stone face on. Okay. But yeah, unfairness, I think that's another theme of this novel is it's part of life. Things happen. And the bigger picture is within nature. Your car skids off the road. A branch, he was worried that a big tree branch was going to fall on his house. I don't know if you remember that part. The power goes out. You run out of fuel. Several things happen. Life isn't fair. And you can try to make it as fair, but usually we can't control things. I can't say, well, it didn't rain on my brother's wedding, but if it rained on mine, that's not fair. Can't really do anything. All right. I want to get here. Let's talk about the Coast Guard lighthouse, because that's the turning point, I think, for a lot of us, because we learned something. What do we learn? Let's just get it out in the open. What do we learn from the lighthouse chapter? Big thing. So really bad, right? Because why? Right, the boat, because if you looked at the records that the Coast Guard were keeping, there was a ship out in the channel, and it was, to simplify, a channel is what, in the ocean, is what we would call a road on land, okay? You really shouldn't be driving your car off the road, okay? Channels are, when you are close to the land, are places where you want to keep your vessel because you know it'll be safe. Because if you go out of the channel, you could run aground or get lost, okay? So this large tanker going down to Seattle was lost and cut through an area. What area? Where did it cut through? Think about it. Somebody answered it. Who was answering it? You guys already answered it? Said something about waves? Okay. So what the waves were caused by? The tanker. The tanker, what I'm saying is the tanker went through the fishing area. And if you look at the logs, and I was in the military, I have experience with this on a ship, you keep very precise records of where you were when. Okay? And at that precise time, At this time, this ship would have been right there. And I don't know if you've ever been next to or close to a tanker, one of those big tankers you see out on the ads for the oil companies, or they carry cars over. Those things make a city block look like nothing. They're huge. So if you can imagine the wave. So bottom line is, what we are learning is that it's probably almost certain that Kabul was innocent. We learn that he's innocent. And Ishmael holds these papers in his hands, and he learns something about those papers. Who else knows about these papers? Well, what are the papers? Let's go back to that. What are the papers? Do you remember? No? Yes? Yes or no? No? Does anybody remember? If not, I'll give it away, but I don't want to steal the thunder. No? They're logs. When you're on watch in the military, and you're standing, it's kind of like standing guard, but on watch, you keep records, okay? So you are on watch. When you're in the military, you're like, okay, you're on watch from 12 to 4 in the morning. Okay, you've got the 12 to 4 watch, okay? And you write, I want you to write, keep this stuff in the log, okay? So when he takes those papers, who else knows about those, what's on those papers? The person who was on duty. Now, do you remember where are the people who were on duty? Where are they? Does anybody remember that part? In chapter 23? I'm going to jump ahead because we need it. They're gone. They left. They transferred. So the only other people who know about this are gone. Nobody knows about this evidence. And he takes it and he puts it in his pocket. Okay. Okay, I'm going to jump. I'm going to move through here. I talk too much. Okay, so you don't have to all agree with me, all right? So Hatsu and Ishmael meet on the beach. Any emotions that you felt as you were reading that? I've read that now 3 times. I've read that scene 3 times. And I have a particular emotion that I feel as I'm reading it. Does anybody have an emotion they want to share? Just a feeling, just like one word. What is he saying? What is he saying to her on the beach? No? Yeah, he's begging her. You're right. He's begging her to hold him one more time. That made me really uncomfortable. How pathetic. It was a really, he's begging her. He says, so I'll be able to let you go. And she's like, no. Was she being cruel or was she doing the right thing? What do you think? Yeah, because you think that was going to help? I don't think it was going to help or make him let her go even more. He goes, I just want to smell your hair one more time. And I'm just cringing. Just like, this is pathetic. And then he agrees to write something in the paper about what's going on at this trial, about the bias. Okay? But that was just a really uncomfortable scene to watch somebody beg like that. I don't think, at least from what I understand, ladies especially, maybe men too, that's not a very attractive quality in somebody, begging, groveling. No. You don't see models groveling Please take me. All right. Okay. Real quick, I want to talk about the scene with Ishmael and his mother. What does his mother want him to do? Right, and what to her would be a normal life for her son. Just get what does a mom want for her son? There you go. That's what she says. She wants him to do this. Okay? And he kind of breaks down at one point in the chapter because he's trying to come off, I think like a lot of guys would, as tough and not upset. But on page 347 at the top, I thought that was a really sad line, but it was so honest and true. 347 at the top of that page. Because he's a young man, but in that moment, what does he become with her? A child, right? But can you understand that? Can you understand someone saying, I'm unhappy, help, I don't know what to do? And then a little further down on that page, if you look right at that paragraph, he says, tell me what to do. And what happens after that exchange is she says, I don't know what to do. I've tried to understand you, but since you've come back, you went numb, and you stayed numb all these years. And I haven't known what to do about it or say about it. I've prayed. I've talked to the pastor. And then he talks about his friends who were killed. And so he's sitting there, tied up in these things. And he looks at his mother. What has his mother lost in her life? What has she lost? What's the big thing his mother has lost? Her husband. And what he notices about her is how she's dealt with it. And I think a couple folks have really put it well. She's moved on. Does she miss her husband? Was she sad? But she moved on. That's nature. That's the thing. You meet someone, you fall in love with them, you could spend your life with them, you love them, and it's unfair. They get a disease and die. Nature, right? So he is watching that, and that's really what she's trying to get across, that's what she wants him to do. That's the only real advice she can give him. Okay, last thing here. This is the big one. I love the way that our chapter ended this way. He reads that letter over and over that she sent him. And he feels the anger again, and it comes back. But let me read the last few sentences of that chapter. Tomorrow he would write the article she wanted him to write in order to make her beholden to him. And then, in the trial's aftermath, he would speak to her as one who had taken her side, and she would have no choice but to listen. That was the way. That was the method. Sitting by himself in the cold of his old bedroom, her letter held uneasily in his hand, he began to imagine it. So let me rephrase that, unless I think you got it. But she asked him to do her a favor. She asked him to do her a favor, to write an editorial in the paper defending her husband and speaking out against the bias. So he says, I could do that. And if I do that for her, she's going to be beholden to you. What does it mean to be beholden to him? She's going to owe him, okay? And the way the trial is going now, what is the likely outcome without anything else coming into it? He'll be found guilty. And I'm not exactly sure but probably, if not life in prison, maybe hung or executed, right? I'm not exactly sure. I haven't really seen that in this. It hasn't really gotten to that. But anyway, he'll be gone. He'll be out of the picture. So, but he has something. He also has the evidence that could exonerate him. So he is facing a choice. He could somehow, in a real twisted way, get her back to him. Bring her back in his mind. Does that make sense? Does this plan, are you getting it? So what do you think? What's he going to do? Is he going to do the right thing and give the evidence to the court and free her husband? Or is he going to take this last shot at maybe winning her back? He's going to do the right thing for the wrong reason. Interesting. Interesting. Anyone else? I'm really going to think about the right thing. I got to go back again now. Anyone? What do you think he's going to?
I think he'd probably turn over the evidence because in either one that he does, whether he writes an article or he turns over the evidence, like he has the power to like kind of change the game of whether he's guilty or not with that paper.
And he'll do the right thing, turn in the evidence.
But probably like still hoping like he's doing that. Like,
Oh, I see. Kind of what she was saying.
like he's still doing like the right thing with turning it in, but like, and she'd know that he was the one that did it, so maybe like she'd still have a feeling.
Ah,
Like then she'd be conflicted and maybe.
interesting. So what you're saying too, though, is that he's not going to grow emotionally. He's going to kind of stay stuck there. Like you've used the word a lot today, move on, and he's not. Okay. Is he going to, what do you think? It's very possible that he could just let this guy, I mean, he feels, I don't know if you got this sense, but when he first came back, and we didn't talk too much about that, but in the chapter, it's really hard for him to see her and with children. There's that incident in the grocery store where he goes off on her and says, G.A.P cut off my arm off. A G.A.P in front of all these people. And then he starts groveling again, saying, I'm sorry. So he's losing his dignity at the same time. And then when he sees Kabuo, he feels hatred and anger towards him. But I don't know, if you've ever been jealous, can you totally not blame him? I mean, does anybody have any sympathy for him, his anger? Because remember, the other thing is he doesn't know why she wrote that letter. Let's end on that note. Let's just be clear. Why did she write that letter? Her mother made her write the letter. There's some sense that maybe at some level she wanted to do the right thing for her cultural things that she's been taught or told by some of her elders. But those words somehow in that letter don't seem to be completely hers. So he doesn't know what she was really thinking when she was forced to write that letter. And maybe she doesn't think it would help for him to know the truth. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to untangle in these last few chapters. And that's what we're going to do in the next 2 weeks. So I want to thank folks at home, G.A.P Great Books on Twitter, and we will see each other again live here at Goffstown High School next Tuesday night. So until then, happy reading.